Welcome to our last session in the 9 illusions. Well done. You've seen it through to the end. The 9 illusions. The reason I do the series is that I just have a tremendous burden. Maybe one of the most defining stories of my life was when I went to a minister's fraternal one day and the Anglican priest arrived and we could all see he looked very down. And we asked him what was wrong and he told us. He said, "My daughter has just told me that she's now at 21, not coming to church anymore." And I asked her why. She said, "Dad, it's nothing to do with you. It's just that I see so many people in your church do not live out what they say they believe." And I just feel tremendously burdened about this. The number of people, they're born again, they're going to get to heaven, but somehow the grace of Jesus doesn't reach into their personality. And they're frankly as ugly as anybody else. And I just have such a burden for it. And I believe this Enneagram is a great aid. It's only an aid, but it's a great aid to this whole business of letting Jesus get into the depths of my personality and actually redeem me from within. There's a great need to be real. There's a great need to face yourself and be honest. If you like what you see in the Enneagram, you didn't understand it. You will not like it if you've understood it. Is that really what I'm like? Because we thought these things were virtues, when in fact they were our very sin. And so we need to make a commitment and ask the Holy Spirit to help us redeem our personalities. It's something He does, but it's something I do. And perhaps the key verse in this is Philippians chapter 2, verse 13, which says, "Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to do according to His good pleasure." There's a two-handed thing. I do it, He does it, working together. He cannot redeem my personality without my help. I cannot redeem it without His help. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. This is a serious thing. For it is God who works in you to will and to do according to His good pleasure. Remember that all of these are illusions, and they all begin with the sentence, "If only I can." If only I can. The number one says, if only I can be perfect, everything will be all right. The number two says, if only I can be needed. The number three, if only I can be successful. The number 4, if only I can be special. The number 5, if only I can be knowledgeable. The number 6, if only I can be obedient. The number 7, if only I can avoid pain. The number 8, if only I can be strong. Tonight we come to number 9, the peacemaker. Remember, we don't particularly like the names because peacemaker sounds like a very positive word. Tough guy, I think, sounds by nature negative, and that's incorrect. Every one of them is wonderful when they're redeemed, dreadful when they're unredeemed. And so, excuse me that I make fun a little bit, but I just try and do a bit of a cartoon to exaggerate, just so that we get a picture for what each one is, first in their unredeemed nature. And so, the number 9. There's nothing wrong with being a peacemaker. It's a wonderful thing to be a peacemaker. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, "Blessed are the peacemakers." It's a blessed thing to be any one of these personalities because you give a particular gift that no one else can give. But like all the 9, they have an illusion. And their illusion is, if only I can avoid conflict. If only I can avoid conflict. It's quite interesting in marriage preparation. I always do a little bit of a questioning until I find out, because one of the couple is always what we call a tortoise, and one is a landmine. It's amazing how they attract one another. The landmine, you tread on it and they explode. You know straight away what they think. The other, a tortoise, as soon as there's trouble, they pull their head in, and you don't know what's going on. And they may keep an outward appearance, but inwardly there's churning going on, but they hate conflict. And so it's amazing how often landmines marry tortoises. These are people who just stay out of trouble. They're quite good at camouflage. A 7, you notice at a party. They're the life and soul of a party. And number 9, it's like the chap who said one day to the young lady the next morning, "I'm sorry I wasn't at your party." And she said, "Oh, weren't you there?" You know, that's a 9. They can just fit into the furniture and you don't even notice if they were there or not. In a more serious way, I remember a woman telling me a story of when she was a girl, about standard 3 or 4. There was great conflict in the home, particularly coming from her father. And she remembers actually putting a serviette over her head and carrying on eating her supper under the serviette. There's a 9 for you. Just hide from conflict. She had a longing to be a doctor, but her dad was something else, and so she became that. And in her 40s, with great sadness, she told me how she longed to be a doctor. And you know what I asked her? I said, "Did you ever ask your dad?" And she said, "No, I never dared to." That's the price of being a 9. So afraid of the conflict that she never even asked. And who knows, maybe he would have said yes. And so she spent her whole career in something she didn't really want to do. 9s particularly live on sayings. They're just sort of sayings that they have. One of them is, "It's no big deal." Nothing's a big deal. It's no big deal. Calm down. Nothing's too big. We like to say of 9s, they can make molehills out of mountains. They can make molehills out of mountains. Nothing's a big deal. Let's just not be too serious about anything here. They'll say, as was said in my household, "Don't upset the apple cart." Ever heard that one? Don't upset the apple cart. What that means actually is don't show your emotion because it'll upset things. That's the kind of motto of the 9. Don't upset the apple cart. Let's keep peace in this place. And one of their most dangerous sayings is peace at any price. Peace at any price. They may not actually say it, but it is in fact their motto. Peace at any price. Peace is more valuable than conflict. So let's keep peace at any price. What they need to learn is that peace at any price is no peace, and it comes at a terrible price. Peace at any price is no peace, and it comes at a terrible price. The world learned this when a number 9 was in charge of the talks at Munich in 1938. Neville Chamberlain coming back, waving his piece of paper, saying, "Peace in our time. Peace at any price." And the world paid a terrible price for that. The deadly sin of the number 9, it's a horrible word, is the word sloth or the word laziness. Now, you could look at a number 9 and never guess that that was his sin. That's true of almost all of them, isn't it? Perhaps not the 8, but the 1 you would never guess anger because he represses it. And number 9s can be very busy people, very busy people. Where the laziness comes in is they don't get around to the important and difficult things, particularly if they involve any conflict. And so, very busy, but their busyness is in fact an escape from doing the difficult thing or confronting the difficult issue. So madly busy in their job, but there's stuff needing doing. They have a motto. I said they live on sayings. One of their sayings, if you don't do anything, you won't do anything wrong. If you don't do anything, you won't do anything wrong, which of course is completely untrue. The sentence they need from the Anglican prayer of confession, not just forgive us the wrong we have done, but forgive us the good we have not done. Their sins are much more the sins of omission, where of course the 8 sins are much more the sins of commission. Forgive us that which we have left not done. The great danger of the 9 is cynicism. They can become, under the surface, you often wouldn't realize it on the surface because they're such nice people, but under the surface, what they're really saying is nothing makes any difference. So why bother? And when you get to that, you've lost all your idealism. Isn't it interesting how the 9 and the 1 are side by side? The 1 with all his idealism. But remember, we can slip. I, as a 1, can slip quite easily into 9 and just lose my idealism and lose my courage and become morally lazy. maybe very busy, but morally lazy. And that is the great danger. Cynicism is a great illness. Once you're cynical, you've lost your belief in life, your belief that things can be changed, your belief in goodness. You've lost your idealism. It's a very serious thing to lose your idealism. The animal, well, no difficulty in guessing the animal here. It is the South American sloth that hangs underneath branches, and he just hangs in there. That's the 9. So slow moving that moss actually grows in his fur. I've got a second picture here of a sloth that actually makes a wonderful picture. A number of people don't see the sloth there. Do you see him? Hanging underneath. That's the sloth, keeping out of harm's way. That's a pretty scary monster up there. I'll just hang underneath here and hope it all goes away. That's the picture of the 9. I just hope it will all go away. The problem for the 9 is that problems very seldom go away. They have to be made to go away. And until the 9 learns that, he's actually victim to any kind of conflict. The other animal actually could be the whale. We in Hermanus here love our whales, but there are far fewer whales here this year. And one of the reasons they think it may be is that when the food supply down south is poor, they simply don't reproduce. And the only ones that have come into land are those who are going to calve. And so probably last year, the food wasn't too good down south, so they just don't bother to reproduce. And that's very typical of the number 9. Well, life isn't good right now, so I'll just hang in there till it gets better. The country of the number 9 is Latin America. The Mexican sitting under his big, broad-brimmed hat, having a siesta in the afternoon. One of their favorite words is domani. Tomorrow. Tomorrow's another day. I like to say of 9s, one of their favorite sayings. They've got lots of sayings, number 9s. One of their sayings is, why put off till the next day what you could do tomorrow? I kind of like that one. Also, perhaps a bit of Africa. By Africa, I mean indigenous Africa. There's an ability to wait till tomorrow. There's a desire to talk everything over. Foreign people into South Africa tend to get very frustrated with African lack of punctuality. But to the African, being on time isn't the issue. All that matters is that the event eventually does happen. And lots of consultation, and everybody's included, see, in a very peaceful way. But that, I'm afraid, doesn't fit very neatly with Western culture, which is where all the money of the world is. And so 2 cultures really are not on the same wavelength here. And yet for our country, what a blessing that especially South African Africans are actually so peaceful. If they hadn't been, where would we be today? I remember years back in the late 1980s in a trip of Israel, and we had a Jewish woman guide. And as we were going along, she was talking about the trouble between Arab and Jew. And you know what she said? Now, this is before the Berlin Wall fell, long before apartheid fell. She said, you will have solved your problems in South Africa, and ours will still be going on. And she's been right. And part of the reason is that with all that we did as white people to black people, there just wasn't an 8-ness about them. There was a 9-ness about them, and we were spared. Terrible revolution because of the peacefulness of the black African. The arrows. The 9 is laziness. That's moral laziness. And love of comfort. Needs to be very careful not to move towards the 6. The weakness of the 6, of cowardice or recklessness. It's much more healthy for them is to move towards the number 3 with their autonomy and their love of constructive action. Number 9s need to get to action. Otherwise, they just drift their lives away. Then we come to the gifts, the wonderful, wonderful gifts of the number 9. A gift that no one else gives in quite the same way. The gifts of peace and calm. Because inwardly, a redeemed 9 is an extremely peaceful person. It's nice to be with them. And if you're going through a rough time and you've got a 9 as a friend, you'll know that's the best friend you can ever have. in conflict, they are great people because they don't, when they're redeemed, they don't churn about it, they keep calm. And I've seen it. I've got a son-in-law who's a 9, and I've seen him in conflict situations where I know as a 1 I would have gone in and made it worse. But he'll say what he thinks. He's learned to be courageous, but it comes without anger. It comes from a base of calm. And it's amazing how it just brings calm. A silent word, a quiet answer turns away anger. The 9 can do that as nobody else can. And then, of course, they have the great gift of peacemaking, as nobody else can do. They can bring peace between parties that no one else can do in quite the same way because they come without agenda. 9s are wonderful people in that what you see is what you get. There's nothing hidden. They are what they are. And because there's no hidden agenda, they're very good in a conflict situation, because conflict situations, so often, people aren't saying what they're really fighting about. But with a 9, that never happens. The real thing will be on the table, and you'll know exactly where you stand. And they're wonderful peacemakers. And this gift of peacemaking, remember Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. This gift of peacemaking is in fact a priestly gift. The word priest means pontifex, which means a bridge. It means that they stand between 2 parties that are in conflict. They actually lay themselves down between 2 conflicting parties. That's a pontifex, a priest. At its greatest, I lay myself between you and God, because you're not at one with God. And I, Scripture says, stand in the gap for you. And it's a wonderful thing. I doubt that many of you will get the example from Scripture, because you think of this person as so full of courage and action that you wouldn't guess. But he's a bad 9. It's King David. Now we think of King David, this little boy, which actually wasn't. He was a big strapping young man, confronting this Goliath. No one else would do it. There is the 9, redeemed at a very young age, out there at conflict. Later on, he becomes the harp player for King Saul, and he brings calm to Saul's very troubled spirit. There's the peacemaker. And then Saul wants to kill him, and he just moves away from conflict, moves away, and never lets Saul get into conflict with him. Wonderful peacemaker. And he makes the most wonderful king. But his 9ness catches up with him in his old age. It's quite sad to see someone so redeemed young sliding as they get older. The trouble he got into Bathsheba, why did he get into that trouble? Why? Because he stayed at home when the army was out fighting. He was avoiding conflict. And avoiding conflict, becoming passive, he became morally passive and got into terrible trouble with Bathsheba. And his ministry, his kingship, was never the same again. He ended his life very, very sadly, with one and another son rising up to come in enmity with him. Until eventually one of the sons named himself as king. And in 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 6, we read this terribly sad verse. David never questioned him, saying, why do you behave as you do? You see, there was his 9ness. He had a very serious problem in family of confronting his own children. Very sad when you find someone who's afraid of their own children, afraid of disciplining them, and he never disciplined his children. And in the end, it ruined a wonderful kingship. The example of Jesus, John chapter 4, my peace I give you. Same night he told the number 7, my joy I give you, he said, my peace I give you. Not as the world gives, something much deeper than that. My peace I give you. And as you read from Gethsemane to the end of his life, those awful hours, the peace and calm of the man is absolutely staggering. My peace I leave with you. Jesus was a man of tremendous peace. He was able to sleep in a storm. Such was the peacefulness of the man. The picture is a Rembrandt picture. It took me a while to believe that, because it's so modern looking, so realistic. There's even someone throwing up over the side of the boat in the foreground. You see that? But look at the close-up of Jesus. his face is wan and drawn. He needed that sleep because his ministry cost him so much. Wan and drawn. It was costly to Jesus, this peace that he brought the world. And then when Jesus eventually was carrying his cross, we remember Isaiah 53 that says, the punishment that brought us peace was upon him. He did not flinch from the pain and the conflict of those last hours. He could have called 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free, but he didn't. He faced that conflict. And note, he brought us peace.